I'm back. Chapter 18, in which blood is smelled and something is not noticed. The next morning's paper route was a blur. No matter who Ravini was talking to or which porch he was badly missing with the newspaper, one word echoed like the persistent caw of a cow in his mind. Ragabounds, ragabounds, ragabounds. Hortense Wallenbach told him one of her fantastic stories, he was fairly sure. It involved the sheriff joining a ballet company to catch a jewel thief, perhaps. Fred Frotham had performed a flamboyant character on his cafe's patio, Ravini dimly remembered. A blurry Russian bear trainer, he thought he recalled. It all faded, though. Beneath the story playing behind Ravini's eyes, a story of a family of children banding together and fleeing the wolves. It was a true story, as hard as it was to believe, and he was now part of it, which was even harder to believe. As he walked back up the porch steps of his house, though, he heard the melodic plinking of piano keys from inside. He stopped outside the door and listened. A murmur of two voices, both familiar, and the chiming of the piano. Strong, confident notes when his mother played. Then Virginia's echo, timid and clumsy, but daring all the same. Ravini stepped inside just as the lesson finished. Virginia was clutching a battered folder to her chest, out of which Ravini could see yellowed pages of music poking. "Welcome back," his mother said, smiling. "You found me a fine piano student. This girl has music in her soul. She's a fast learner, too." "I can't even play a song yet, Mrs. Foster," Virginia said, but she was fighting a proud smile. Miss Foster ticked her tongue and rubbed Virginia's shoulders. "You have to learn your words before you can tell a story, but I can see that you have a story to tell, sweetheart." Virginia's face spread in a smile that on anyone else could have been called lukewarm, but on her counted as beaming. "And you, Mrs. Foster," continued, looking at Ravini, "have a lunch to deliver." "Again?" he protested with a groan. "I tried a new curried potato salad recipe this morning, and it had to chill. This one has lemongrass." She said it like Ravini would care. He did not. "The sack is in the fridge." "I'll come with you," Virginia said. "I'd like to see the meat factory." "You would?" Ravini and his mother asked in unison. Virginia shrugged. "I've never been in a meat factory before." So it was then that Ravini found himself walking up to the office of the Skinnister slaughterhouse with both Virginia and Colt Deering at his side. When they'd stopped by the Ragabound's house to pretend to ask for permission from Virginia's mom, Colt had excitedly joined them when he'd heard what their destination was. His excitement dimmed, though, when he saw the cows waiting miserably in the lot outside. "Oh," he said uneasily, "I guess I thought the cows showed up already dead." "No," Ravini sighed. "They're alive, but not for long." His thud, the building coughed. His smooth thud. Like always, Mr. Skinnister was frowning behind his desk. His eyebrows rose when he saw Ravini. "Young Mr. Foster, and with some companions, I see. Good morning, Mr. Skinnister. These are my neighbors, Virginia and Colt." There was a shaking of the hands and an exchange of hellos, and then Mr. Skinnister eyed the sack in Ravini's hands. "What's for lunch today, then?" "Potato salad," Ravini answered. Mr. Skinnister looked almost disappointed. "Curried potato salad," Virginia said, "with lemongrass, chilled." Is there—" "Yes, sir." Ravini handed over the small jar his mother had made for Mr. Skinnister, who took it with eager eyes and licked lips. His smooth thud. His smooth thud. "What's that sound?" Colt asked. Mr. Skinnister's eyes dimmed. It was a cow. At least the moo part was. Colt's forehead wrinkled doubtfully. His curious enthusiasm seemed to fade a bit with each moo, and the more than a bit with each thud. Cows are nice to look at, Mr. Skinner said. So are hamburgers, I suppose. It's all the steps in between that are a bit unpleasant. Virginia frowned. She and Colt both looked a bit paler than they had before. You don't have to go to the killing floor, Ravini said to them. The killing floor? Virginia asked, looking more than a little unsettled. Mr. Skinner winced. I hate that term. It's grisly and inaccurate. Oh, Virginia said hopefully. Why isn't it accurate? Mr. Skinner frowned and answered in a soft voice. Because it isn't the floor that kills them, he sighed. It's us. Mr. Skinner's words hung in the air for a moment before being swept out by a hiss-moo thud. All right, Colt said abruptly, putting an arm around Virginia. Have fun in there, Frog Master. I think we'll wait right here. Mr. Skinner nodded somberly. An industrial slaughterhouse killing floor may not be the best place for a nice young girl, he said. Then he frowned and mumbled mostly to himself. It may not be the best place for anybody, really. Certainly not for the cows. He sighed gloomily, then brought his attention back to them. Getting you all splattered with blood wouldn't be the best way to welcome you to our town. It wasn't, unfortunately, lunch break for on the killing floor yet. The details of Ravini's walk to the lunch benches were like toilet paper, best left unshared. He did at one point have to make eye contact with his father across the slaughterhouse floor to let him know his lunch had arrived. Ravini willed his eyes to block out everything except the blurry shape of his father. He waved, but his father didn't wave back. His hands were, quite unfortunately, quite full at the time, which Ravini also tried to block out. His father nodded and offered an attempt at a smile. At that moment, there was an especially loud and nearby hiss-moo thud. A blast of air blew back Ravini's hair, and a sickling warm mist spritzed his face. Throat tight and stomach curdling, Ravini left the chilled curried potato salad with lemongrass on a bench, then made a scurried escape. He did his best to keep his eyes averted and his breakfast down. He burst back into Mr. Skinner's office. The secret to a good Alfredo sauce, Mr. Skinner was saying, his lunch on his desk in front of him, is using. The secret to a good Alfredo sauce was cut off by Ravini's abrupt arrival. He stood with his back pressed to the door, gasping and gagging. Hello, Rav, Virginia motioned. Did you have a nice visit to the killing floor? Excuse me. Can we go? Ravini asked, still fighting the rising bile from his belly. This is top-notch sauce, Colt said to Mr. Skinner, ignoring Ravini. He was licking his finger and smacking his lips thoughtfully. Real premium stuff, Mr. Skinner. You ought to bottle this and sell it. Sell sauce? Mr. Skinner repeated, befuddled. There isn't even any meat in it. Colt shrugged. There ain't no meat in soda pop, and folks seem to buy up that. He grinned, and his eyes sparkled. You know why pea soup is better than roast beef? Mr. Skinner frowned. No, because anybody can roast beef. It took a second for Mr. Skinner to get the joke, but then his eyebrows rose, and he sat back in his chair and barked out a guffaw of a laugh. I'm telling you, sir, you got a winner here, Colt said, licking his lips again and pointing at the Alfredo. Huh, Mr. Skinner said, scratching at his cheek. Hiss-moo thud. Back outside, they stopped for a moment while Ravini sucked in great breaths of fresh air. Virginia looked into his still frantic eyes and pursed her lips. You okay, Rav? You look like you got punched in the guts. Please don't say guts. Colt squinted at him. I don't know if now is the right time to ask this question, Frogmaster, but theoretically speaking, if you had blood splattered on your forehead, would you want someone to tell you or just wipe it off? Ravini's nausea perked right back up. Wipe it off, I guess, he answered shakily. Colt pulled the bandana out of his back pocket and dabbed it along Ravini's forehead. He was sticking it back in his pocket when the flyers on the bulletin board by the slaughterhouse door caught Virginia's eyes. Red River Raft Race, she read. What's that? Ravini frowned and started walking. Just a dumb thing that happens every year. Huh? You ever won? I've never even raced. She looked at him. Why not? He shrugged. I don't want to. I hate the stupid raft race. Why wouldn't you want to do a boat race? Colt asked, chucking a rock at a tree as they were passing. Sounds fun to me. Well, I mean, I don't. Well, Donnie always wins anyway, Ravini sputtered. He blew out an exasperated breath. And besides, you need a team of two to race, and I never. He trailed off, looking away. Oh, Virginia said quietly. Ravini's face burned. I don't want to do it, he insisted. No offense, buddy, but it kind of sounds like you do, Colt said. Ravini opened his mouth. He had his next lie ready. But as his soul cast around for the right words to lie, instead they stumbled onto a truth he hadn't known until that moment. He did hate the raft race, but not because he didn't want to do it. He hated it because he did want to do it. He remembered sitting on his father's shoulders as a kid, watching the older children splash and laugh and holler their way down the river, the rest of the town cheering and laughing along. Okay, when I was little, I always thought like when I was older, I don't know, that I'd have, that there were too many truths and too many wishes and too many fears and too many lies for Ravini to know which of them to say. And finally he landed on a truth that surprised him as he said it. His shoulders slumped. I guess maybe I have always wanted to do the race. Someday. Someday, Virginia echoed. You mean someday when you're old enough? You're 12, right? He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. You mean someday when you've got all the time in the world to make a boat? You mean someday when you've got a creek across the street to practice in? You mean someday when you've got a comrade to do the race with? She raised an eyebrow at him. Welcome to someday, Rav. You're already here. Ravini's mouth opened and closed. He looked from Virginia to Colt. If there's something you've always wanted to do and you get the chance, you probably ought to do it, Colt said wisely. Take me, for example. I have always wanted to say the words, lay it on me, old man. And if the chance ever presents itself, you can be darn sure I ain't going to let it pass me by. Lay it on me, old man, Virginia said with a bored incredulity. Ravini snickered. Yep, heard someone say it on a radio show once. It sounded spectacularly nifty the way the kid said it. Been waiting for my chance ever since. What an inspiring story, Virginia said. I cannot believe that I willingly call you my brother. Likewise, sis, Colt said, reaching around Ravini to slug her lightly on the shoulder. Then he nudged Ravini. So, Ravini walked for a few steps between them. He took a steadying breath, and then he took a leap. Virginia, dearie, do you want to do the boat race with me? Took you long enough, she said. Of course I do. Ravini grinned. They just reached the bridge. Colt stepped to the side and leaned on the railing and looked over the edge. Virginia and Ravini joined him, peering down at the flowing waters of the creek below. Then a thought occurred to Ravini that flattened his smile. But will Tristan let you? Oh, he'll let her. It's all part of the plan, Frogmaster, Colt said. Plan? Sure, Virginia said. She looked up and down at Skinnister Street, making sure no one was there. People are looking for us. Police and stuff, probably. But we can't have folks getting suspicious. We only hide out for a week or so. Then we start letting ourselves be seen, become part of the scenery. Imagine if school started and all 7 of us just showed up out of nowhere, Colt added. There'd be a lot of questions, right? So we got to be out and about. walk along newspaper routes, talk to slaughterhouse owners, splash around in a boat race, for example, so that folks get used to us. Hiding in plain sight, that's what it's called in the Always and Forever. Ravini stared at the water. It was a lot for a group of kids to have to think about. Don't you ever get tired of all that? Colt pitted a great glob of spit down into the current. When he spoke, his voice was uncharacteristically soft. Sure we do. At least I know I do. Tired of hiding. Tired of running. But running and hiding is better than getting caught and locked up. Madame Merdosa said if we ran away again, she would send me to some horrible boys' reform school she knows. Some prison on an island, basically. He shook his head. I belong with the family. Ravini nodded. Sometimes a soul just does the best it can to survive. He knew that firsthand. Well, your secret is safe with me. Colt threw an arm around his shoulder. I know it is, buddy. He gave him a squeeze, then raised his arm in a stretch. Let's skedaddle. You two got some work to do, and my afternoon nap ain't going to take itself. Standing there, Ravini noticed the summer smell of mud and leaves rising up from the creek bed, and he noticed the pair of goldfinches flitting from the tree to tree upstream. And he noticed how Colt's words and Colt's arm around his shoulder had him feel a sort of good he'd never really felt before. There were things he didn't notice, though, there on that bridge, and sometimes the things a soul doesn't notice are even more important than the things it does. Stories are about choices, yes, but they're also about mistakes, even if a soul doesn't know it made them. Come back for chapter 19.